The neon glow of Sci-Fi twin moons bathed the outpost in silver light. Humans and Andarans filled the grand hall, their voices blending into a low hum. It was a rare gathering, one meant to celebrate the uneasy alliance between the two species. At the center of it all stood Lieutenant Adrian Voss, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, and built like a warrior, he was used to standing out among humans. But tonight, he was just another guest in a room filled with Andarans, an alien race that was stronger, faster, and, according to them, superior. He could feel their eyes on him. Commander Selyavana, one of the most renowned Andaran warriors, leaned against a crystalline pillar, watching him with a smirk. Her deep violet skin shimmered under the lights, faint bioluminescent patterns pulsing along her arms like veins of energy. Tall and lean with sculpted muscles, she moved with the ease of a predator. Her silver-white hair cascaded down her back, and her golden eyes held a sharp, knowing glint. She stepped forward, her movements effortless, graceful. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had never met a challenge she couldn't conquer. "Tell me, human, are all of your kind as fragile as you look?" A few Andarans nearby chuckled, watching with interest. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That depends. Are all of your kind as arrogant as you sound?" The chuckles stopped. A few Andarans looked at each other, surprised that a human would speak so boldly to Commander Vena. But instead of offense, Celia's smirk widened. "Brave words," she mused, tilting her head. "But words are easy. Your body, however, I doubt it can handle me." The air between them grew tense, electric. Adrian knew exactly what she was doing. Andarans valued strength above all else. If a human backed down from a challenge, they weren't worth a second glance. He wasn't about to let that happen. He stepped closer, meeting her golden gaze without hesitation. "You want to test that theory?" Celia's smile was sharp, predatory. "I do." A murmur rippled through the Andaran warriors. One of them, a towering male with emerald green skin, chuckled. A human daring to challenge Vena. "This will be amusing." Celia turned to the crowd. "Tomorrow. Dawn. The training grounds." Then she glanced back at Adrian, her golden eyes gleaming. "Let's see what you're really made of, Lieutenant." Adrian didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked. "Hope you're ready to be surprised." Celia let out a low, amused hum before turning and walking away, her bioluminescent markings fading slightly as she disappeared into the crowd. Adrian exhaled, rolling his shoulders. His squad mate, Lucas Grayson, clapped a hand on his back. "You do realize she's going to break you in half, right?" Adrian chuckled, eyes still locked on where Celia had disappeared. "Guess we'll find out." The challenge had been issued. There was no turning back now. The sun of Axira 9 burned a deep orange as it rose over the training grounds, casting long shadows across the arena. The air shimmered with heat, but the Andarans standing in the spectator area didn't seem bothered. They stood tall, their glowing markings pulsing faintly in anticipation. Today, they would witness something rare, a human stepping into the ring against one of their best warriors. Lieutenant Adrian Voss stood in the center of the sand-covered battleground, rolling his shoulders to loosen up. He was dressed in a reinforced combat suit, though it felt almost useless against the opponent he was about to face. Across from him, Commander Selyavana stretched her arms, her bioluminescent veins glowing brighter in the morning light. Her golden eyes studied him, amused but focused. "You still have time to back out, human," she said, her tone almost teasing. "No one will think less of you for avoiding unnecessary pain." Adrian smirked. "You talk like I'm already defeated." Celia let out a low chuckle. "Oh, I know you'll fight. But will you last?" A deep, echoing chime signaled the start of the match. The Andarans watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. Adrian had faced stronger opponents before, enhanced soldiers, combat droids. But nothing like this. Celia moved like a shadow, a blur of violet and silver. Before he could react, She closed the distance and struck. Adrian barely dodged the first attack. Her fist cut through the air where his head had been a second ago. He twisted his body, countering with a sharp jab to her side, but she blocked it effortlessly. She was fast, faster than any human should be able to track. Celia grinned. "You have good instincts." Before he could respond, her leg swept beneath him, knocking his feet from the ground. Adrian hit the sand hard, dust flying up around him. The Andaran spectators murmured, but Celia didn't press the attack. She tilted her head, waiting. Adrian clenched his jaw and pushed himself back up. His heart pounded, but he refused to let frustration take over. He had spent years training in close combat, learning to read an opponent's movement, predicting the next strike. But Celia was different. She was holding back. "She's testing me." Adrian exhaled sharply, adjusting his stance. "Fine. If she wants a challenge, I'll give her one." This time, he didn't wait for her to attack. He moved first, feinting left before twisting right, aiming a sharp kick toward her ribs. Celia dodged, but just barely. Her expression flickered with surprise. Adrian pressed forward, forcing her to defend instead of attack. He didn't need to overpower her, just keep her guessing. Their movements became a blur, a dance of speed and precision. Each time she struck, Adrian avoided the full impact. Each time he countered, she adjusted. Sweat dripped down his back, muscles burning from the strain, but he kept going. He had to. Then, in a split second, he saw an opening. Celia shifted her weight slightly off balance, just enough for Adrian to act. He twisted his body, driving his elbow toward her core, only for her to block at the last second. But she wasn't fast enough. Adrian swept his leg behind hers, pulling her off balance. Celia's eyes widened slightly as she stumbled, her back nearly hitting the ground before she flipped midair, landing smoothly on her feet. Silence. Then, laughter. Celia straightened, brushing sand off her arm, her golden eyes gleaming. "Not bad, human. You're full of surprises." Adrian exhaled, steadying himself. "You too." Celia gave him a slow nod of approval. "This match isn't over, but you've already proven more than I expected." The Andaran spectators murmured, clearly impressed. For the first time, Adrian realized something. This wasn't just a fight. It was the beginning of something bigger. Adrian's breath was steady, but his muscles burned. Sweat trickled down his brow, but he refused to wipe it away. Across from him, Commander Celia Vena stood tall, her bioluminescent markings glowing faintly, her golden eyes still locked onto him. There was something new in her gaze, not just amusement, but interest. The Andaran spectators had fallen silent. They had expected an easy win for their commander, but now they watched with something close to respect. "You learn quickly," Celia mused, stretching her arms. "Most humans would have lost by now." Adrian smirked, rolling his shoulders. "I'm not most humans." Celia chuckled, shaking her head. "No, you're not." Without warning, she lunged. Adrian barely had time to react before she closed the distance between them. He threw up his arms to block, but she moved too fast. Her fist slammed into his side, not hard enough to break anything, but enough to send him staggering. Pain flared, but Adrian gritted his teeth and steadied himself. She was testing him again, pushing him to see how much more he could take. Fine. He could take it. Adrian shifted his stance, moving before she could strike again. He feinted right, then ducked low, sweeping his leg toward her knees. This time, she saw it coming. She leaped over his attack, twisting midair with a grace no human could match. But Adrian had expected that. As she landed, he surged forward, using the momentum to drive his shoulder into her core. The impact sent them both tumbling into the sand. For a brief moment, he had the advantage, his weight pressing down, pinning her wrist. Then, in the blink of an eye, she reversed it. Adrian barely had time to register what happened before he found himself on his back, Celia straddling his chest, her forearm pressing lightly against his throat. Her silver-white hair had fallen over her face, but through the strands, her golden eyes gleamed with something close to admiration. The crowd was dead silent. Celia held the position for a moment longer before she leaned in slightly. "You fight well, human." Adrian's lips twitched. "You too. You're only slightly terrifying." Celia laughed, a low, rich sound that surprised him. Then, just as quickly, she rolled off him and got to her feet, offering a hand. Adrian hesitated for half a second before taking it. Her grip was strong, warm. She pulled him up effortlessly, as if he weighed nothing. The moment he was standing, a voice called out from the crowd, "Enough." An older Andaran warrior stepped forward, his emerald-green skin shimmering under the sun. General Kale Cyros, Celia's superior. His golden eyes flicked between the two fighters before settling on Celia. "This match was supposed to prove a point," he said, his deep voice carrying across the arena. "What have you learned?" Celia tilted her head slightly, then glanced at Adrian. A slow smile spread across her lips. "That humans are more durable than they seem." Some of the Andaran warriors murmured among themselves. Kale's gaze shifted to Adrian. "And you, Lieutenant, what have you learned?" Adrian wiped the sweat from his brow before meeting the general's gaze. "That Andarans aren't unbeatable, just very hard to beat." Celia smirked, crossing her arms. "A fair answer." Kale studied them for a long moment before nodding. "Interesting. This alliance may have more potential than I thought." Then, without another word, he turned and left. The other Andarans followed, some giving Adrian lingering glances, no longer dismissive, but curious. As the crowd thinned, Celia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You surprised them today, Adrian Voss. You surprised me." Adrian exhaled, still catching his breath. "Guess you'll have to keep testing me, then." Celia's golden eyes gleamed. "Perhaps I will." The battle was over, but something told Adrian this was just the beginning. Adrian's muscles ached as he walked through the towering corridors of the Andaran warship. The duel with Celia had left him exhausted, but he couldn't deny the rush he still felt. He had held his own against an elite alien warrior. More than that, he had earned her respect. He wasn't sure what that meant yet. The metallic halls shimmered with dim blue lighting, and soft energy pulses ran along the walls like veins of a living creature. Andaran technology was beyond anything Earth had. It was sleek, advanced, almost alive. As he turned a corner, a familiar voice called out, "Human." Adrian stopped. Celia Vena stood near a viewing window, her silver-white hair flowing down her back. Her golden eyes glowed in the dim light, studying him with a look he couldn't quite decipher. He smirked. "I do have a name, you know." She tilted her head. "Yes. Adrian Voss, Earth soldier, second in command of the diplomatic envoy." "That's me." He stepped closer, glancing out the window. Beyond the glass, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, stars glittering like distant fireflies. Celia's voice was quieter this time. "I have a question." Adrian turned to her. "Go ahead." She hesitated, as if measuring her words. Then she asked, "Why did you accept the challenge?" Adrian blinked. "You mean the duel?" She nodded. "You could have refused. The others would have called you weak, but your mission here is diplomacy, not combat. And yet, you stepped into the arena against me, knowing you would likely lose." Adrian thought about it. Finally, he shrugged. "Because I needed to prove something. To us. To myself." He met her gaze. "I don't like being underestimated. And if we're supposed to be allies, I needed to show that humans aren't fragile. That we belong here, just as much as you do." For a moment, Celia was silent. Then, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You are different from the others." Adrian chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." She stepped closer, folding her arms. "There is an assignment, a high-risk mission. The Andaran Council has been discussing it for weeks, but no one is willing to volunteer. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Why not? Celia's expression turned serious. Because the last two teams sent did not return. A tense silence filled the space between them. Adrian exhaled. Sounds fun. What's the mission? Celia studied him for a long moment, then finally spoke. A hidden station on the outskirts of the Drekari expanse has gone silent. It was an Andaran research base. Now there is no communication, no response. Something happened there. Adrian frowned. You think it was attacked? We don't know. No distress signals were sent, and no bodies were recovered from the first investigation teams. They just vanished. Adrian's mind raced. A deep space station going dark without a trace. That never meant anything good. And you want me to go? He asked, his tone half-joking. Celia's golden eyes burned with intensity. I want to see if you can handle it. Adrian smirked. You keep testing me, Commander. She smirked back. I enjoy a challenge. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. All right. Who's going with me? Celia's expression didn't change. Me. Adrian blinked. Of all the things he had expected, that wasn't one of them. Adrian adjusted the straps of his tactical suit, double-checking his gear. The Andaran research station was a ghost facility floating at the edge of the Drekari expanse, and he was about to step into it with nothing but his instincts and an alien warrior at his side. Celia stood near the ship's airlock, clad in her dark combat armor. Her silver-white hair was tied back, revealing sharp golden eyes that flickered with determination. She carried herself like a true Andaran warrior, graceful yet powerful. Adrian exhaled. Still time to back out, Commander. Celia smirked. I was about to say the same to you, human. The ship's eye chimed. Docking sequence complete. Airlock is secure. A deep mechanical hiss filled the chamber as the hatch slid open, revealing the dimly lit corridor of the abandoned research station. The air inside was cold, carrying the scent of metal and something faintly off. Adrian tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. I don't like this already. Celia stepped forward without hesitation. Stay close. They moved through the station in silence, their footsteps echoing. The walls were lined with broken screens, and emergency lights flickered weakly. Papers, tools, and shattered glass littered the floor, as if the crew had left in a hurry. Adrian clicked his communicator. Mission log said this place was researching an advanced biotech. Anything specific? Celia's voice was calm but firm. Classified. Adrian sighed. Of course it is. They reached a control panel, and Celia pressed her hand against the interface. The holographic display flickered to life, distorting before stabilizing. Red warnings flashed across the screen. Power at 12%. Main reactor unstable. Security logs corrupted. Celia frowned. The logs are scrambled. But look, she pointed to a report timestamped 3 weeks ago. Final entry. We have failed. It's loose. Do not. And then nothing. Adrian's gut tightened. That's never a good sign. A sudden noise echoed through the station, a distant clank, followed by a dragging sound. Both of them went still. Celia's hand moved to the hilt of her energy blade. We are not alone. Adrian slowly turned, scanning the dark corridor. The station was supposed to be abandoned, but something was moving in the shadows. A cold breath of air swept past him. Then, a whisper. Not words, just a sound. Faint, broken, like static bleeding through a radio. Adrian tightened his jaw. Tell me Andarans don't have invisible monsters. Celia's grip on her weapon tightened. Not that I know of. Something shifted in the darkness ahead. A figure. Tall. Wrong. Its limbs moved unnaturally, twitching in sharp, jerking motions. Adrian raised his rifle. Celia. The creature stepped forward. Pale, glassy eyes locked onto them. Its face, human, or what used to be human. Flesh stretched thin over an elongated skull, its mouth slightly open, revealing rows of sharp, uneven teeth. Then it moved. Too fast, too unnatural. Celia ignited her energy blade, the golden light illuminating the hallway. The creature recoiled, its body convulsing violently. "Run," Celia commanded. Adrian didn't argue. He fired a shot, the plasma bolt slamming into the creature's chest. It shrieked, a horrible, distorted sound, but didn't fall. Instead, it lunged. Adrian barely dodged, rolling aside as razor-sharp claws slashed through the air. Celia swung her blade in a precise arc, severing one of its arms. The creature didn't even react. "Adrian, move." He fired again, this time at the ceiling. The weakened support beams gave way, crashing down between them and the monster. For now, it was blocked. Breathing heavily, Adrian turned to Celia. What the hell was that? Her golden eyes were sharp. Not Andoran, not human anymore, either. The station groaned around them, as if something else was stirring. Celia exhaled. "We need to find the control room. Now." Adrian nodded. "Agreed. Because I don't think that thing was alone." Adrian and Celia moved swiftly through the dim corridors of the abandoned research station, their footsteps quiet but urgent. The eerie shrieks of the creature they had encountered still echoed in the distance, a reminder that they were not alone. "We need to reach the control room," Celia said, gripping her energy blade tightly. "That thing, it was no accident. Someone made it." Adrian checked his plasma rifle. "I just hope we don't run into more of them before we figure out what the hell is going on." The hallways were filled with debris, broken screens, scattered datapads, and flickering lights casting strange shadows along the walls. The station had once been a place of science, but now it felt like a tomb. As they turned a corner, Adrian noticed deep scratch marks on the walls. They weren't from a weapon. They were from something trying to escape. "Whatever happened here, it didn't end well," Adrian muttered. Celia didn't reply, but her golden eyes scanned every inch of their surroundings, tense and alert. Finally, they reached a reinforced door with "control room" written in faded letters above it. The panel next to the entrance was still active but flickering. Celia placed her hand on the scanner. The system hesitated before emitting a weak beep, and the door slowly creaked open. Inside, the room was surprisingly intact. The main console was still active, displaying a massive holographic interface filled with encrypted logs and security footage. Adrian moved to the console. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." He activated the logs, skimming through corrupted files until one finally loaded. A scientist appeared on the screen, her face pale and frantic. "If anyone finds this, we tried to contain it, but we were too late. The test subject, Project Revenant, was not what we thought. It adapted. It learned. And now, it's hunting us." Adrian exchanged a look with Celia. The scientist continued. "The station's fail-safes were disabled from the inside. Someone let it out. We don't know who, but it's too intelligent. It can mimic human voices. It knows we're afraid. And it's using that against us." The video cut out. A moment of silence filled the room. Then Adrian muttered, "Well, that's just fantastic." Celia's fingers danced across the console. "There's something else here. A security override. We can lock down the station. Trap it in one sector." Adrian nodded. "Then let's do it." She activated the sequence. The system responded, and across the station, emergency barriers began to lower, sealing off sections of the facility. Then the screen glitched. A distorted voice filled the room. "You think that will stop me?" Adrian's blood ran cold. The voice was warped, unnatural, but familiar. It was his own voice. Celia grabbed his arm. "We need to move. Now." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. A loud screech tore through the speakers, and the security system failed. Adrian gritted his teeth. It's inside the system. The station shuddered, as if something massive was moving through its structure. Then, from the hallway behind them, a whisper, a shuffle. A shadow stretched unnaturally along the wall. Celia drew her energy blade, her eyes burning with determination. It's here. Adrian raised his rifle. The control room door slammed shut behind them. They were trapped, and the creature was waiting. The room felt colder. The air itself seemed to vibrate with something unnatural. Adrian tightened his grip on his plasma rifle. His pulse pounded in his ears. Celia stood beside him, energy blade glowing in her hands, her golden eyes scanning the shadows. The whispering returned. It wasn't one voice. It was many, overlapping, distorting. Then, a shape moved. Something was forming in the dark corner of the control room, a twisted, shifting mass of shadow and bone. It was watching them. Adrian didn't wait. He fired. The plasma round burned through the darkness, lighting up the room with a blue flash. But the moment the light faded, the thing was still there. Then it spoke. "You're afraid." Adrian froze. It wasn't just any voice. It was Celia's voice. He glanced at her. She was still beside him, tense, her face unreadable. But the thing, it was learning, adapting. "You think weapons can stop me?" The creature whispered. The voice changed again. This time, it was Adrian's own voice. Celia took a step forward, her blade humming with energy. "You're just a failed experiment," she said coldly. "And we're not afraid of you." The creature lurched forward. Adrian barely had time to react before something slammed into him. Pain exploded in his side as he was thrown against the wall. His vision blurred. Celia moved fast. She swung her blade in a perfect arc, cutting through the air, but the creature shifted, moving like a living shadow. Adrian groaned, forcing himself back up. His ribs ached, but he couldn't stop now. Celia was keeping the creature distracted. It moved around her like a dark mist, shifting between forms, mocking her voice, laughing in distorted echoes. Adrian's mind raced. Plasma rounds barely slowed it down. Blades didn't cut deep enough. Then, he remembered the console. The creature wasn't just physical. It had infected the station's systems. He ran for the terminal. The screen flickered with warnings, power failures, security breaches. His fingers flew over the keys. There had to be something, some way to purge the system. "Adrian!" Celia shouted. He looked up just in time to see the creature strike. A long, jagged limb lashed out. Celia blocked it, but the force sent her crashing to the floor. Adrian didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He activated the station's core override. A deep mechanical hum filled the air. A warning message flashed across the screen. "System purge initiated. Warning. Core melt deovillion in 5 minutes." The creature screamed, not in anger, in fear. The station itself began to tremble. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as the control panel surged with energy. Celia rolled back to her feet. "What did you do?" Adrian grabbed her wrist. "No time. We need to get to the escape pods." The creature's form twisted, writhing. It was breaking apart, losing control. But even as it collapsed, its voice slithered through the air. "You think this is over?" Adrian didn't answer. He was already running. Celia followed, her blade still humming. Behind them, the creature let out one final, inhuman shriek before the doors slammed shut, sealing it inside. The countdown was ticking. They had 4 minutes to escape, and something told Adrian this nightmare wasn't over yet. The station shook violently. Sirens blared. Red emergency lights flashed across the steel corridors. The air smelled of burning circuits and ionized gas. Adrian sprinted down the hall, his boots pounding against the floor. Celia was right beside him, moving with effortless speed, her golden eyes sharp with focus. How much time? She shouted over the alarms. Adrian glanced at the countdown display flashing on the wall. 2:47 remaining. Not enough, he shouted back. The escape pods were still 2 decks away, but the station was falling apart faster than they expected. Behind them, the bulkhead doors groaned and collapsed inward, twisted by the force of the failing reactor. A wave of heat rushed through the corridor, forcing Adrian and Celia to push forward even faster. Then, the station tilted. Gravity lurched, pulling them sideways. The artificial stabilizers were failing. Adrian grabbed the nearest rail, his fingers slipping as sparks rained from the ceiling. Celia's hand snatched his wrist, keeping him steady. "We have to move," she said, her voice tense. Adrian nodded, pushing past the burning pain in his legs. They rounded a corner and stopped cold. The hallway was gone. A gaping hole had been ripped through the deck, leading straight into open space. Blackness stretched beyond the torn metal, stars gleaming in the endless void. The station trembled again. Pieces of the ceiling broke away, sucked into the vacuum. Celia's face hardened. "We go around." Adrian's mind raced. The alternative route was through the maintenance tunnels. Cramped, unstable, but still intact. "This way," he motioned. They pushed forward, slipping through the narrow service hatch. Inside, the walls hummed with dying energy, flickering lights casting eerie shadows. Celia led the way, her breathing steady. Adrian crawled behind her, each second feeling like an eternity. 1:30 remaining. A deep, unnatural rumble echoed from behind them. Adrian stiffened. He knew that sound. "It's still alive," he whispered. Celia didn't turn, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. The thing, the entity, wasn't done with them yet. "Don't stop," she said firmly. They reached the end of the tunnel. Adrian kicked open the hatch and stumbled into the escape bay. The pods were still there. Relief flooded him until the lights flickered. A deep, inhuman whisper filled the air. "You can't escape me." The walls darkened, the metal shifting like liquid, as if something was trying to pull itself through. Adrian lunged for the nearest pod, slamming his hand against the controls. 30 seconds left. Celia was already inside, gripping the pilot's controls. The shadow in the room coiled, forming the outline of something almost human, twisted, broken, yet smiling. Adrian threw himself into the pod. "Go. Now." Celia punched the launch button. The doors sealed shut just as the shadow lunged. Then, they were falling. The escape pod fired out of the station, spinning into space. Through the viewport, Adrian saw the station collapsing inward, glowing with a sickly red light. And then, it exploded. A shockwave rippled through the void, the remains of the station scattering like dying embers. Adrian let out a shaky breath, sinking into his seat. Celia sat across from him, watching the destruction with unreadable eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Celia exhaled. "It's over." Adrian wasn't so sure. Even as the station's remains drifted into darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had survived. Something was still out there, watching, waiting, and it would come back. One day.